record on this computer. Okay, cool. So we are recording, and so we're going to start by just going over Active Record really quick with this slideshow. So I know John might have talked a little bit about Active Record yesterday. I'm not really sure how much you guys got to. What do you know about Active Record? What is Active Record? Sean?
It's an ORM that allows you to use much simpler Ruby-like commands.
Yeah, it's an ORM. It allows you to use Ruby commands to do things. What's an ORM? What does that mean? What does that do?
Object relational mapping.
Object relational mapping, and what does that mean? Like
it's like a driver that allows you to like look up the Ruby command, the Postgres command. And so it basically just you put in a Ruby command and it maps it to the right Postgres SQL command, and it just tells that to do that. Like just a translator essentially.
Yeah, I think that's a nice way to think about it. It's kind of a translator. It allows us to write Ruby code and execute SQL commands. And so it's a way for us to interact with our database, but with much easier and much simpler commands in Ruby, which we're already writing. So it kind of allows us to just stick with writing this one language and kind of is a layer on top of our Postgres database, but we'll still be using Postgres. We'll get into it a little bit. Sean, you have a question?
So, like, I mean, I still don't get it because I'm learning how to do this in Ruby, but like conceptually, like if you wanted to use Postgres directly, like inside of Ruby, you could still write a full Postgres command query inside of Ruby, and
yes,
it will still just do it.
Absolutely. So you can write straight up SQL commands in Ruby. Yeah. And I'll remind me, and when I get my text editor open, I can show you a little bit of what that looks like. I don't remember because I don't do it a lot, but essentially you save a big string of the SQL commands that we've been writing, and then there's some Ruby method to execute it, and I can't remember exactly what it is. So you can do that, but mostly we don't because we have this tool that does it for us, right? So this is the SQL commands that you've been doing so far. What is this doing? Yeah, inserting a first name and a last name into our students table, right, that we already have. So Active Record allows us to do this exact same thing. I think it's important to understand that like there's no magic with Active Record. It's not doing anything different than we've been doing. It's just kind of abstracting a layer away from us and allowing us to basically write less code and interact with the database a little bit more quickly and cleanly. So this is what it would look like in Active Record, right? So this is how Active Record would insert something into the database. What do you notice about this right now? What do you see that we've already been using?
I mean, it's kind of like a function almost, and classes. And inserting arguments into those classes.
Yeah, it's we're instantiating. It looks like a hash. Yeah, exactly. I mean, because we have these key value. Whoops, I always forget you can't click on this crap. Okay, we have key value pairs, right? So we have a first name, and the key, and then the value, the first name, right? But really, what it looks like we're doing, I think you guys are all dead on. Like we're using a class here. We have student.new, so we're instantiating a new student object, right? And so when I open the code and we look into this, there's going to be for our tables, and I hinted at this I think last week or earlier this week, but a lot of our tables that we have in our database, we're going to have corresponding classes in our code. Right, and that is how we're going. That's one way we're going to have Active Record kind of communicating with our database, and we're going to represent our data with objects, right? And we call them as we keep going, and as we start getting web apps, we're going to call those our models. You're going to hear that a lot. And models is just it's an object that represents a table, essentially, right? And they're going to look and behave and basically be exactly like Ruby classes and objects, except they're going to be Active Record objects, which just gives them more functionality. Cool. So we make it here, We make it in a very similar way than we would make any object. And then at the bottom here, all we do is call .save. What do you think happens when we call .save? What does that do?
Saves the student record.
Where?
Whatever database you're working in.
Saves the student record to the database. Oh, look at that. That was the question. Yeah, it essentially runs this exact same command, right? So we create the object here, and all the key value pairs that we're putting in, we can think of these as our columns, right? So we know we have a column for first name, a column, we have a student table, then we have a first name column, a last name column, a date of birth column, right? We save this. Right here, it's just a Ruby object. But because we have active record, when we call .save, active record knows I'm going to grab all these attributes, assume that there are columns that correspond to them and are named the same in a table in my database, and I'm going to create this SQL command, essentially. Yes?
Do you, like, I mean, I guess you build out the table first, though?
Yeah,
also,
we're going to get to that. Yeah. So with active record's also going to make it easier for us to create these tables and create the database. We'll get to that in a second. Cool. This is just the docs. I think that's all I want to talk about. Oh, okay. So there's kind of a pattern here. We talked about some of this stuff. So for each table we have, we'll have a corresponding class. So if you can see, like here on the left, we have kind of what's going on with our database, and here on the right, here's what's happening. And this is pretty similar across any object-oriented language, right? But what's going on in Ruby. So each table is going to have like a class that corresponds to it. So that's our like blueprint for what this model behavior it should have, and instance variables that it should have. Let's see. Oh, damn it. Okay. Our columns, like I said, will be our instance variables. And active record, we're not going to have to write any. We're not even going to have to do add or reader or add or writer. Active record is going to give us the getters and the setters out of the box. So we'll be able to call person.firstname, person.lastname right away. Let's see. And then it's going to give us methods. So we were just talking about inserting before. But we can also query our database, which we were doing a little bit of this week, right? So we were doing join tables. We were asking for, like, give me this column where like it is equal to, you know, this person's name or this ID or whatever. We're going to be able to do stuff like that with methods like find by, find, give me the first one, where, etc. We'll explore most of those. And actually, most of today is going to be about you diving into the docs and getting on Google and just seeing what's possible and tracking down kind of how to write these queries, which I know you did a little bit, like that was kind of similar to how you were doing SQL. This is going to be, I hope for you, a little bit easier, at least a little bit more straightforward in how it's going to read and how it's going to perform. Are there any questions about this so far? Really, the whole thing I want to get across just in these few minutes is that active record is just kind of another layer on top that's going to allow us to execute and perform a lot of the same stuff we've been doing with raw SQL today, but in Ruby. Cool? All right.
Can you leave that up for a second?
Yeah, I'll leave that up for a second. I can also post it in Slack after.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Sorry, I didn't know.
The slides are also up.
Yeah, why don't I do that? Hello, John?
Hey, the slides are also available for anyone to see.
Oh, the slides are available for anybody to see. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. I will post a link to them in Slack, and then I'm not really sure where else they are.
I actually think it's in the curriculum on yesterday.
Oh, awesome. It's in the curriculum for yesterday.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. All right. So let's look at how some of this stuff works. So I'm going to take this first challenge. And I know a lot of you haven't done it, so I don't think I'm going to do the whole thing, but I think we'll do at least the first part of it. And we'll spend some time talking about what's going on with a lot of this code. What the hell is this thing? Get out of there. All right. So I'm going to CD into my desktop. This cord out of my way. I'm going to git clone this challenge. I'll press the right command to do that. I'm going to cd into active record queries. I'm going to open it in Sublime. Put Sublime up here. Sublime opened weird. Fix that. Okay, cool. So I've got my Chrome open here. My Sublime is open here. I don't know why it's not showing up. My computer behaves weird when I hook it up to this projector. So, and then I got my terminal over here. So let's read through and see a little bit about how to set up. So the first part, this release 0 of this, is just setting up your environment. So we're going to go through these tasks, and then I'm going to show you a little bit about how they're working and what they're actually accomplishing. Okay. So the first thing it wants us to do is run these rake tasks. Rake tasks are a thing we'll see more of. They're going to come, a bunch of them are going to come built in Ruby. You can also make your own. And they're just tasks. You can see right here. We have this rake file right here. Rake stands for, oh, what does it stand for? Ruby make, I think. And they're just, it's just a way to take, like, these are all commands right here. This is all just written in Ruby. You don't have to understand all of it. It's not important, but it's all just written in Ruby. And these are just tasks that you perform often. And so if you're performing these over and over and over again, it's nice to have shorthand for them. And so rake is a part of Ruby that allows you to kind of make these shorthand commands, right? So they're all included in here for you. And that's why we just have to run them based on what's right here. Does that make sense? Yeah, cool. And I think the reason they're already kind of included is because when we get to Rails, they're just built in, and you'll have a ton of them. So it's just good to practice and good to know. And good to know that if there is a thing you're typing over and over again, you can make your own task for it, and you just put it in a rake file. And rake will just know to look for that file and execute those commands. So let's do them, and then we'll see what the heck is going on with them. So the first one here, I'm actually just going to copy and paste it. Oh, wait, before I do this, I want to do one other thing. My bad. So before, we've been installing gems one at a time, right? So if we needed rspec, we would do gem install rspec. If we needed, what else have we been using? Rspec. Oh, pry, we would do gem install pry. As your projects get bigger and you're using more and more and more gems, I mean, you could have dozens of gems. And so every time you boot up your, enter your application and try to open your application, having to type gem install, 50 times is not what we want to do, right? So we should all have, and if we don't, you can get it by doing gem install bundler, but I already have it, a gem called bundler. And what bundler does is when we run bundle install, it will look in the directory for this gem file, which is right here. And it will read through all these gems and install them for us. So we can do all that. This is a really good habit to get in right away when you're downloading these challenges, because not only will it download the gems for you, it will download the correct versions, which are saved in this gem lock file. You should never edit this gem lock file. You shouldn't mess with it. You shouldn't really have to do anything with it. This is just here for bundler, so it knows what versions of everything to download. And you can see a lot of these gems depend on other things or have other like kind of sections that they need certain versions of. Cool. So I'm gonna run bundle install. And since I have most of these, it went really quick. So you can see using, that means I already had all of them. If you didn't, you would probably see something like fetching, and it would download the appropriate gem for you. Cool. Okay, so I've bundled installed, which means I have all my gems. And now I want to run my rake tasks, which are over here. I'm just going to copy it actually right here. Rake aborted, load error. Oh, I think I need to do bundle exec. There we go. Okay. So what did I just do? I ran the rake task and you see it failed the first time, right? What can happen is, especially if you're downloading gems, I might have different versions of these gems installed on my system, other places. And when I just run rake, and it tries to run that task and it knows it depends on a gem, it might see I have two versions and not know which one to do. So when I run bundle exec before any command, it goes back and checks my gem versions in my gem lock and makes sure that it executes that command using the correct version of the gem. I believe that's correct. That's how it works. Does that make sense?
Correct,
So
yeah.
good. Sorry?
I said that's correct, yeah.
Oh, sweet. Thanks, John. I always like validation. So a good rule of thumb going forward, when you run a command, bundle exec before you run it. Bundle exec before you run it, just double check. So write it down, tattoo it on your arm, whatever you need to do, bundle exec. Cool, so you can see I got this thing dropped database active record. That's because I was messing with this before and I already had an active record database, which I don't want. I want to start fresh. So that's why our first task is just to make sure you don't already have this database. We're going to run this, drop it so we can start fresh. Cool. So the next thing I'm going to do is create the database. I'm just going to go up and change this to create. Cool. Created database active record. Let's see. Do I want to do this first? What's our next one? Migrate seed. Cool. So this made our database. This was like when we were making. Remember, we were making Postgres databases, but it doesn't have any tables in it yet. So I think I could actually do SQL just to prove this. Div record.
It's a hyphen between active and yeah.
Thank you. No, you're good. CRUD test. Cool. So here we have this right here. If I do /d, I should get nothing because I don't have any tables, right? I haven't made any tables yet, but you can see that the database was created, right? How do I get out of here? We'll jump back in here in a second. So the next thing I'm going to do is run my migrations. We'll talk about exactly what these are in a second. But what this is essentially going to do is create my table for me. My tables, I don't know. I think there's just one for this. Cool. So we can see right here, it did a bunch of stuff, and it created a table called products. So now we can see, now I have a table products, right? So I just want to show you the what's going on with the Postgres to let you know that, like, again, it's not doing anything magic, but it is allowing us to create these things a little bit more quickly, right? So it's doing exactly what we've been doing kind of by hand the last week, but it's giving us these tasks that are doing it for us. So let's go into the code and see kind of where did this table come from, right? Like, where did all the code for this table come from? Because normally, how would we create this table? Like, roughly, what was the SQL? What did the SQL look like?
Create table, and then the table's name.
Yeah, create table, the table's name, and then we were listing like varchar and all this stuff, right? Our columns, etc. So if I go in here, this is kind of how we're going to be creating tables from now on. This is an active record migration. And so what we have here is a class called create products. So we're naming this class exactly what it's doing. It's creating a products table. And then it's inheriting from active record migration, which is, we have this gem installed active record that has a ton of different classes and methods kind of attached to it. So we're inheriting from active record migration, which is giving us a bunch of functionality. Then we just define one method, change. Inside there, we are given by active record something called create table. And essentially what create table does is makes a table. It's a pretty self-explanatory, right? But it allows us to write this code in Ruby rather than in SQL. So create table, we give it a name of what we want to call the table. And then we can represent, then we have this block here, and we just represent it with, here we do a T, that's kind of standard, T for table. You could, again, call it anything. It's just a variable that's representing the table in the block. And then we go down the line, and we can start to define our columns. So t.string, I have something called manufacturer. It's a string, and the value needs to exist, so it cannot be null. I have another string for model. Description is text. So string is going to be your varchar, right? Up to 255. So anything like that, you're going to call a string. Anything bigger than that, like a block of text. So if you were doing a blog or something like that, you would want to do text because that's going to allow you to save much more data there. We have an integer here for price and cents. We have a float for rating going down. This t.timestamps at the bottom will put created by, it will put two columns in our table, created by and updated at. Which, I don't know, did we go over those columns? Did we talk about created by and updated at? So they're pretty good. They're columns that are pretty standard that you should have in pretty much all of your tables. And they save exactly what their names are, right? So created at will get saved and you will know when that column got created. This is good to know, like, if you had a bunch of users and you wanted to know, like, or if you had an online store and you wanted to, like, send out a like a coupon for users that had been with you for like 3 years, right? You would have this created at field. You could know how long someone's been a user or how long someone's been a customer, etc. Updated at gets every time you update your column, so like someone's address changes, their name changes, etc. The column that you're editing will get updated, and then automatically updated at will get updated as well, right? So you'll know the last time someone made a change to that column. T.timestamps does all that for you. So you just throw that on the end and it'll do that stuff for you. Cool. Let's see. There's something missing here that we had on all of our tables, like every single one of our tables, but we don't have it here. Does anybody see what it is?
ID.
Yeah, thank you. ID. We're missing the ID. So when we do create table, active record just assumes we want an ID and puts it there for us. So we do not have to specify. And it will put an incrementing ID in the table just automatically for us. So that is still there. It's still an extremely important part of our table, but we do not have to specify it. Active record just does it for us. I believe if you wanted to do some other special way of keeping track, like some other identifier, you can overwrite it. I don't really know how to do it right now, but by and large, you're just going to do it this way. Okay, so know that ID will still be there. We just don't have to specify. So when I did, let's see, when we ran bundle exec rake db migrate, it essentially ran this migration is what we are calling them now. Okay, so this migration, this create table method, and gave us this, our schema right here. Oh, wait, no, wait. That's not the table, is it? Oh, sorry. There it is. There it is. And so made this table for us. Cool. Questions so far? This is a lot to take in, but don't worry. You're going to play with this so much today, it'll get ingrained in your head. Cool. What was the other thing I wanted to show you? Okay. So we have our database now. And the next thing we want to do is fill it with data. So we are going to run seed. Cool. So seed, what does seed do? Do we know what, does anybody know what seed does? When we seed the database, what that means? Makes it grow. It kind of does. It kind of does. Kind of does. Yeah, thanks. Absolutely. It just we're inserting data into the database. Right now, we're just using a bunch of dummy data to seed the database. And so now we're filling in our columns, essentially. So now we have data that we can see, that we can mess with, actual things that we can query out of the database, because before we just had an empty table. Okay, so now we're all set up. You're going to run through these steps yourself, but just want to give you an idea of what they're doing. So let's look at the challenge specifically. Just pass tests. So you've set up, your goal is to get the tests to pass. So we should probably look at our tests and see what we have. Okay, cool. So let's see, we have find by ID, find the matching product by model name, raises an exception, finds the last record. So these are all of these going down, and there's a bunch of them, and they're gonna get more complicated as they go, are just querying the database, which we've been doing with SQL, and now we want you to practice and get better, or start to see the power, I guess, of Active Record, and how it's going to allow you to do a lot of these things by typing a lot less code. So let's actually set this up and do a couple of these. Let's see. So, sorry, one more thing I want to show you guys. I have this product class. And so we saw on the slide earlier, and I said before, when we have a table, we're going to need a corresponding class, right, to model that data. That class is going to inherit from Active Record, and that's going to kind of import all of these methods and all of these, all of this behavior that we can use. You can see here, I don't have any adder reader, adder writer. I haven't really put anything else in this class, and I don't need to. Active Record is going to do all of that for me. So now product is going to have a ton of functionality that it's just inheriting from Active Record. Cool? So, but I believe in our test, sorry, where's our tests? Here we go. We're actually testing product CRUD, which is just this other class that I think is going to stand in between, so we can put some methods in here. Cool. Cool. So we want product CRUD to have the behavior here in our spec file. Let me do this. Sorry. I want to keep opening the spec helper. Okay. So here's our spec file. And so the first thing we want, product CRUD, which is what we're describing up here. And that's kind of, we have this variable right here, described class. That's grabbing whatever's after this describe. And the reason we're doing that is because if I decided to change the name of this class, if I wanted to call it like cool products or something like that, I wouldn't have to go down into every test and change that variable, right? So described class is just grabbing whatever's right here. So we have described class. There should be a method in product CRUD we can call on the class called find, and it should return, looks like the product at ID 10. Let's see. Cool. Does that make sense? So this is, how would we do that in SQL? Can someone, you don't have to get it 100%, but talk me through like how would we do the, how would we query the database for the product with ID 10 in SQL?
Select products.
Select products.
Where ID is equal to 10.
Yeah. So we would write a query command, right? Select, we would have to tell it what table we wanted to look at, what row we were, or what column we were looking at, and then what the value we wanted of that column is, right? In Active Record, we have a bunch of methods, and one is find. And so we can give find any ID, and it'll just return the row that corresponds to that ID. So let's see here. Let me show you how that, I actually want to show you how that works real quick. I think I can do, so another rate command, we've been doing IRB. You guys have been using IRB. Something that you're going to start using, hold on a second. Cancel. we have something now called the console, break console. And I believe it, I want to do bundle. Console. Oh, thank you. Great. So what's great about this is now we are basically in IRB. We're in an interactive environment, but it is imported everything in our app, right? So before, if we wanted to bring our file in, we would now have to do like require this, require this. Well, our apps are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And so requiring every single thing in there is going to get very tedious, right? So now I can interact with the code in my app, and I can also interact with the database. So we know we have a, excuse me, we know we have a model called product, right? And we made a table for it, and we seeded that table with a bunch of data. So I have my model product. So I'm going to show you just a couple of the methods that we have now because of Active Record. One is just all. I can call product.all, which what would the sequel for that be? It would be like star, right? We would tell it what table and then star. Product.all will give me an array of all of the products that are in the table. So you can see it's an array here. It's a product object. And then we can see kind of all the data in it. Make sense? We get a couple more. We can do product first, just to get the first one. I even think we can do second to get the second one. We can do, so what were we talking about? We were talking about find, right? Product.find. And we wanted to find by, does anyone remember the ID? 10? So find is only going to take an integer, and it's only going to return an ID. Or I mean, return, excuse me, search by ID. So find is just kind of a built-in method specifically for ID. So if we do find 10, there we go, there we get it. Product ID 10, and we get everything that we want out of it. Cool. So actually, I think that this might be pretty close to what we want to get our test to pass. So let's come in here. Let's see, def, what do they want this to be? Find. Oh, I think, okay, so and we're calling this directly on product CRUD, so that means it's a class method. So self.find. And what is this going to take?
A number.
Yeah, just an ID. So we want to write a method like, in our test, they're passing 10. But ideally, we want to write a method that will do this no matter what, right? So we're just testing for 10, but we look at the it block, it'll describe exactly, it should find anything by its ID, right? So these first couple we write are going to seem a little repetitive, but it's just because we're basically writing a find, and now I'm going to use find. But as they get more complicated, you'll start to see the value of breaking them up into methods. But this is just like to get us started. So what did we do? We did product dot find, and we passed it an ID. Cool. Actually, I'm going to comment this out just for a second because I forgot one very important thing, which is we should watch all our tests fail first. And then we'll see if we pass that one. So I want to do bundle.
There's also a fail fast that you might want to.
Fail fast? Is that a flag?
Dash. It's a dash dash fail dash fast.
Cool. Dash fast?
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Thank you. Sweet. What, is that just going to run ones I have methods for?
No, it runs everything until you have the first failure, so you don't have a huge barrage of red.
Cool. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So we failed our first one, which is what we wanted, right? So let's go back now and comment product in, save that. And now hopefully we will see some green. Yeah, we did right here. So we passed our first one and then we failed our second one. Cool. All right, so let's take a look at our second one. Find by model. Okay. So we will have, I don't know what's going on with my.
And the reason why we're using the self is.
So yeah, that's a great question. So why are we using self here? Because what we're really doing is we're defining methods on the class itself. So these aren't when you make an object, you wouldn't call these methods on the object. We want the class to kind of represent all products, right? And so we want to be able to search all of those products. So we're making these class methods for that reason. So right here, like you can see, we're not describing like an instantiated object. We're creating class methods that you call directly on the class. So like this right here is where we have described class. It's the equivalent. It would look just like, let's see, like that. Cool.
So, so if you were instantiating something, then you don't use the self. If it's returning an object, we wouldn't want to use the self. But since we don't want to like return an object, then we use self. It's not
really what we want to return. It's what we're going to call the method on. So if we were writing methods that we wanted to call on a single object, like if I had a dog object and I wanted to make the individual dog object bark, then I wouldn't need self. Does that make sense? Yes.
Why are you calling product instead of product CRUD?
Because we're kind of, this is an abstraction just, so we're calling product because that is, let's see. Let go. Product is what we're using to inherit from the database, right? So the product class is inheriting from the database. Product CRUD is kind of like, this is kind of like a playground we made for this, and John can correct me if I'm wrong, but for this challenge, so that we had a place to put these methods, right?
Yeah, pretty much. So if you click back to product real quick.
Yeah, sure.
And you see, so every single product object is inheriting from active record base. So all of these methods that we're writing, it exists directly on the product class. But what we're trying to do is we just have a layer right in the middle called product CRUD. And that's just, you take a look on the first line, it's just a plain old Ruby object. So this is not inheriting from anything. We're just trying to teach in this class will never be used again. It's just for this particular, challenge, just to like teach you to kind of go and Google around for different methods. So that first test, what we're really doing is saying like, hey, there's a find method that lives on an active record base class like product on line 3. There's a find method and we can use that. On the next one, it's like find by model. So that one's fairly simple. There's gonna be like a product.findBy. Like there's a find by method and then it exists on the product class. We just have a little layer in between that product CRUD, just to kind of teach you all to, how to associate those two.
So how does product know about product CRUD? Like how are they talking if you're not connecting the files?
That's the great part of, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
So the great part about Rails and stuff like that at this particular point is that somewhere inside the setup, I think it's within config, there is the ability, I think it's app.rb. You don't need to know this, but between lines 18 and 20, every single file requires every other file. So you never need to, as long as it's all in like one kind of, as long as it's in one folder and those particular lines between 18 and 20 are there, every single file is going to require every other file. So you don't have to require relative this, require relative that. It's already required for you. So even if you created another model within that models folder where product and product CRUD are, it's perfectly fine. Like everything will be required.
Cool. Let's do a couple more of these. And then I think I'm gonna get you guys started. And then we'll see if maybe in the afternoon we take a look at them. We'll see how you guys are doing. See if we need to do another one. Okay. So this next one, what does it want? It wants us to find the matching product by the model name. So again, just you can kind of keep in mind, like, how might I have done this in SQL? What am I really looking for? and then we'll see how to do it in Active Record. I know how to do this one, but I'm going to do a Google search real quick just to show you kind of like if I didn't know how I would approach this. So, yes. So it's what is it asking for? That's what I look at first. Find the matching product by the model name. So essentially, I want to go into the database. So model name is an attribute. I know that. And one thing that Active Record gives us that's very helpful is after we run our migrations, I always lose this, we get something called our schema right here. And this is basically, there's a bunch of stuff going on here, but really what I use this for mostly is a reference of what my database looks like. So I don't have to keep going into Postgres and doing like -d whatever and see what it is. This is going to tell me what my database looks like as of my last migration. So I can see again that I have a string manufacturer, and then what am I looking for? Model. So I know that it's a string. I know that it has to exist, right? So basically, I just want to search for this attribute. It should be attached to every row. Every row should have this value. So let's say. Let's see if we can find this. So I want to do Active Record, and we want to, let's see, search by attribute. Let's see if I do this. So we have the active. So, oh, here we go. So we come to the Rails docs. You will be here a lot. And this is going to show me. Oh, here we go. This is great. So here are a bunch of methods that Active Record gives me, right? And so I can just kind of go down the line and start to see like, okay, find. I know already that that only takes an ID, right? That's only going to give me an ID. I don't want to create distinct extending. Let's see. Joins, limit. Some of these look like they're filtering stuff. So like order. But then I'm going to come all the way down here and I'm going to see where. That kind of actually reminds me of a SQL command, right? So I'm going to actually look at where. Let's see. It's going to show up 100 times, so that's not help me. Let's just do this. Here we go. Where options, let's see, I'm gonna look at the example. Cool, so it looks like, I can call it on my class, right? Or yeah, my model. So here, in here they're calling a client, call where. Looks like I can just pass it a string with I'm assuming this is the column name, and then this is the value I'm looking for, right? So another way we can test this, and I would encourage you to do this, is we can go back into the console. And I can try it out. So product.where, it looks like a string. And what am I looking for? What was the column? Model? Where model equals, what did I want? What did I want it to equal?
See you later.
Heavy duty steel clock. Cool. So this works way better when you spell product, right? What happened here? Maybe it doesn't. Maybe it doesn't work at all.
Can we go back to see that we have to have like quotes around?
Try single quotes around heavy duty steel cloth.
So this has to, see, I thought, so I feel like we can actually do it this way. I was trying to model that, but I think we can just pass it like, I think I can do model like this.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep. No. Yep.
Like that?
There. Yep.
And then pass it a string, right?
Yes, I believe so.
What was it? Clock?
Yeah.
There. Not where. That can't be how it is. Steel clock. Oh boy. Copy that. So, well, this is a good thing to notice, though. Like, so we still got back an active record object, and we still got back an array. It's just empty, right? So that's a good thing to note. We didn't get nil. We didn't get undefined. We just got this empty array. So it searched, and it filled this array with everything it found, which was nothing. All right, 5th time's a charm. Oh, there we go. Cool. So this is a thing to notice too. So where is returning us an array? In this case, it just gave us one thing, right? Or wait, did it give us one thing or two? Looks like one. Okay. If we wanted to search, and similar to SQL, like if we wanted to search like something like a field that was going to give us multiple things, we would then have an array of multiple things. Cool. All right. Let's see if we can do one more. Oh, okay. So now let's implement this. Let's implement this. So we know the active record command that's going to help us with this. And we know we need something called find by model. So we'll do self.find by model. All right. Who can walk me through the rest of this method? What are we going to do?
We're going to take a model argument.
We're going to take an argument that is a model. Cool. And then what am I going to do with that?
Product dot where,
Yep.
and then model.
Like that?
Yeah,
Something
Yeah, we're missing something.
we are missing some.
equals.
Yeah.
Well, I think model, both the category we're looking for and our argument have the same name. So I think it would just be model : : model.
I don't know if we would need another column. I think we can just do this, right? Because it's just a variable. And so this we're saying, here we're saying, look in the column model, and then we're just passing this variable in. So whatever the user passes in. Okay, cool. Let's see if this passes our test. And then maybe we'll do one more. And then I'll let you guys get to. Here we go. So we should get 2 passes and a fail. Let's see what happened. Looks like we did something wrong here. Product basic find by model finds an
Is model name.
Model name.
I don't know. I'm not sure.
Let's look at our schema. No, it's model.
Try calling before model, see if that works.
This is what we did in our console, though, correct?
Yes.
Let's see what we did. Oh, where did that go?
Maybe we need to put it in quotes. I don't know.
It should come in as a string.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's see. Maybe I named it wrong. Maybe something like that. It should actually be. Find by model. Find.
Sorry, go back to the schema real quick.
Yeah.
Model is a singular string. Okay, so you go back to product CRUD spec.
Sure.
There's two solutions. The product CRUD either has to have a dot first on the line 7, or you can actually do find by.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Cool. Thank you. So before we saw we were returning an array, correct? So what this is asking for is the actual product. So we were getting an array with one product in it, but the test didn't know that. All the test saw was an array, and it expected a single object. Does that make sense? And so John brought up a good point too. So we could do dot first, or we could even just get it out of the array like this, right? This will pass, but then I'm going to refactor it because John reminded me that there's a better method for this. This should pass. See? Yes, so we got 2 passes now, right? And 1 fail. So that was the problem. So this is a good lesson, like, what are you getting back? What is your test expecting, right? We were technically getting the right answer, right? But our test was not just expecting like us to just find it. It was expecting us to deliver that exact object, and we were delivering an array, and so it wasn't the type that it was looking for. Does that make sense? We can refactor this and do something called, which I completely forgot about. Find. So find just takes an integer. We can do find by, and that will take a column name. And so this should also work. On our test. And cool, we have 2 passes and 1 fail. Cool. Let's do one more. This one was this one. Find by raises an error. The last record inserted. A lot of these are like one method. I'm trying to look for one where we have some. Okay, we'll do this one more. All right, so we're gonna do this one right here. Find by rating. Finds products by their average rating. So let's see, describe class. Match, all right, product, where, ID. By rating. Okay. Cool. Let's see. Def self dot. All right, so what are we looking for here? Let's talk through this one. Let's pseudocode this one out. Finds products by their average rating. Let's look at our schema and see what we have at our disposal. By their average rating. Actually, I'm a little confused by this one because I thought they only had 1 rating. Product.where.
This one's the dot where.
This one's dot where?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, it's asking, it says that it's expecting a rating of 3.5 to match where, so all of the IDs, 7, 8, 9, so all of those records should have a 3.5 rating. If that makes.
So we're just, oh, okay, so average rating is what we're saving right here? Is that what this is?
Yeah.
So we're just looking for it by rating?
Right.
Okay.
So it should just be,
I was hoping to choose one more exciting where we had to do math, but okay, let's just do this one real quick. Okay, I misunderstood. I thought we were gonna have to look at a couple of ratings and find the average, but you'll do that later. Okay, so product.by rating. So we're going to give it what? What do we need to look for? We can look at our test.
The ID.
What is it giving? Is 3.5 an ID?
It's an integer or float.
Mm-hmm. But what information do we need to run this query? Is what I'm saying. Where we're going to find we want to find the objects that have this rating.
Taking the rating.
Taking the rating. So we need the rating that we're looking for, which I will type in the correct file. And we did this one on accident before when I screwed up. So what are we going to do here?
Product.
So we want, like, we don't just want one thing now, right? We want a bunch. We want everything where this is true, where this rating is equal to what's in the column for rating.
Right. So product dot find.
What does dot find
Oh,
take?
I'm sorry. Where?
Yeah, there you go.
Model.
Model is
not
that?
model, but rating.
Yep.
And then rating.
Cool. I think that looks good. And so what is the difference between find by and where here? I just want to make sure we're clear on that, and because I'm just figuring it out too.
Find by actually finds it by the model name itself
Mm-hmm.
and returns just that.
Yep.
And where finds it as well, but returns the entire array or the entire row.
So both of these return the entire row. Like, or both of the, like find by will give you, it'll search by model, but it'll give you everything in that row. The difference here is find by is just going to grab one thing. It's going to return one thing to you. Where is going to return everything that this evaluates to true for, where the rating equals the rating, right? So you're going to get a collection back with where. And since we want several things, that's what we're hoping. That's how we're hoping this will work for us. Cool. So we'll save this, not like that, out of here. And we'll come here and we'll run our test one more time.
Well, we might want to get rid of the flag this time.
Which one?
I would say we might want to get rid of the flag this time when we run the test because it's so far down.
Oh, yes. Thank you. Thank you. Forgot we were doing one all the way far down.
Yeah.
Cool. So we should have one like right in the middle. I'm not going to count to make sure, but I'm pretty sure. Let's see. Cool. So right here, we passed. Cool. So the takeaways for this, we're doing a lot of the same things that you've been doing all week with raw SQL, right? But now we have Ruby code that's going to allow us to execute that stuff much more quickly. You can use these queries. I want you to think about this too as you're going in the challenge. So you're going to have these query methods. I think there's even a link right here. Yeah, methods, active record. This is going to be a great resource. The Rails docs are really good. They're very thorough. They're long, but you get better at going through them. This is a good place to start, this list right here. Clearly define for yourself what you want. If you can write a sentence, I want this, where this happens, and then I want to do this with the data. If you pseudocode it out, you're pretty much going to see in that language, will probably lead you to the methods you're looking for. I also want you to know that you can still run any Ruby code. So when you're getting an object back, you can treat it like any other Ruby object. So you can run loops on it, and you could put if statements in these methods if that's what it calls for. And you can search the arrays like you would search any other array, etc. So keep in mind that you're going to have these active record methods, but you're also just going to have any other Ruby things at your disposal too. Cool. Are there any questions before we kind of throw you into the? No? Pretty good? Okay. Cool. John, anything to add before I stop this?
No, I think we're good.
All right, cool. Okay, so I'm going to stop the recording.